Basically, better prediction reliability compared to our competitors. This means a higher correlation percentage between prediction and measurements, probably in excess of 95, like the statistics. Improved calculation speeds resulting from massive processing and virtual machine licensing schemes. The new software supports both existing and new technologies, so that's emerging technologies. It provides fully optimized network planning and incorporates a host of variables which allow complete coverage and capacity even for ultra-dense networks. It's fully compatible with all our previous versions. All previous users of ICS Telecom and ICS Designer will be able to integrate existing network parameters. It features an easier map import. It has some new data creation, so that's map data creation functions, and the export for coverage and outputs from both from ICS Telecom are now vastly improved and can be shared against other departments, perhaps like sales and marketing. So what are the options for end users? So if you're an existing ICS Telecom or ICS Designer user, you can migrate to the new software free of charge. These upgrades are available to everyone that has an existing maintenance contract. The migration process will be staggered over the next few weeks. Your account manager will receive the email outlining how to migrate and the process that's involved. The migration process doesn't affect your existing maintenance contract, and you will be eligible for software upgrades up until and including your next maintenance renewal. So that's any versions that we release between now and your next renewal you'll be eligible for as well. The cost of renewal, once we get to the renewal process, remains the same. There'll be no additional charges for existing customers. So it's no additional charges on your current technical support and maintenance costs. So what else is new for existing customers and new customers? We've updated our pricing structure, which makes our software far more competitive. It's a great bonus for the end users. We've also introduced a more flexible approach to licensing. There's two ways that you can license your software at the moment. You can buy a lifetime license, which probably a lot of you are currently using, or you can hire a license for a fixed period. So what's the biggest change, I guess, for us at the moment is that higher licensing, and really the benefits of that are quite simple. For short-term periods, it's more cost-effective. So if you've got a short-term project or a fixed-term use of the software, then hire may be an option that you should consider. It allows for organisations to offset the cost of the software purchase hire only against projects. That's not the same for if you purchase a perpetual license, a lifetime license. Those costs can't be offset. It can help you increase capacity for short periods. If you've got an intense amount of work that you need to complete over a given time, you can boost your current permanent licenses with high licenses. And it allows you to manage both lifetime and high licenses simultaneously. So using the same software, you'll just have different methods of activating the software. At the moment, if you have a lifetime license, you may well be using a hardware dongle. With a higher option, it will be a fixed option to a PC or a laptop for the duration of the hire with a software activation key. If you want to learn more about this is our new customers online, please do contact your local office and they'll help you out. I'm going to hand over to the engineers now and let them run through some of the new features and functions of the software. If you've got any questions, again, please do use that questions toolbar. Over to you, Paul.
Okay, thanks, Sarah, and good morning, everybody. So I'm just going to introduce briefly the user interface. Okay, so what you're seeing here is the ICS Telecom EV interface. We've got a menu structure at the top here, so being able to drop down, bringing up some menus. So for example, I can, on this map menu, look at, say, the elevation model layer, or switch to one of the map layers. And then we've got really the way it's been grouped is that there's common features, so things like coverage, which would be common to a number of different technologies that are grouped together under this menu. So being able to run a network calculation, undertake some analysis of those results. But there's also the perhaps more specific ones, such as the satellite menu or the radar menu, which kind of logically groups together those common elements, just to make it a little bit more intuitive to be able to find them. So that's the top toolbar. So I won't go through all of those, but just to give you a feel. And then we have this, below this we have the different shortcuts for the toolbars. So I'm just going to pick out a few of these that are probably going to be of interest. So allows us to get into the first one on the left here, things like the station list, being able to access our station database, subscriber database. The ability to get into settings quickly, so being able to look at things like thresholds, maximum distance settings for coverage calculations. Moving over to things like the rectangular draw select, and you'll see that I've got these tooltips that are popping up there as I'm hovering over. So if you can't remember what those icons are referring to, then you've got this icon or this tooltip rather that will show you. So for example, on the coverage calculation analysis, if I click on that, say I was undertaking a coverage calculation, I have a shortcut into it here. And then if I was looking to invoke it, I would obviously put in some key parameters. Height of the receiver, and I can actually change between meters and feet there, so particularly useful if you're looking at perhaps aeronautical coverage where we're looking at an elevation in feet for your receiver. And obviously I could then invoke that if I was looking to undertake a coverage. And then on the right-hand side here, we have some of these kind of last commands menu, and I'll show you some of those in a second and a different way to access those, and some of the station shortcuts here on the right-hand side. Okay, so just moving on to the map area. So we've got these anchors and quick access as they're referred to. So on the kind of the 4 points of the compass here. So on the left-hand side, we've got a summary here that just gives you the number of stations on the map, activated, deactivated, just a quick way of establishing what you've got within your project that's set up. On the right-hand side, I've got quick access to previous commands, the last commands that I've done. So particularly useful if you've done, say, a process running through a series of menu structures, as I started to show you at the top, and then you want to go and repeat effectively the similar thing. It just allows you to shortcut into that. Towards the bottom, I've got the object properties. So you basically just hover over these little anchor points and they pop up. So that's, again, another quick access into that. And then at the top, we've got the map layout, and I'll come on and say a little bit about that further later in the webinar. There's also the ability for these top and bottom preferences here to actually turn those off. So if you so wish, there's the ability to, and these are called the dynamic map selector in the display options. And simply that's for the ones that sort of the top and bottom or north and south as we're looking here. So if you prefer not to have those on the display, then there's the option to turn those off. So just moving over to the right-hand side, there's this information display bar. So that gives me things like coordinate information, so my XY position, height of the terrain, if I've got a cluster layer loaded, what type of cluster I've got, and also things like distance. So when I set a reference point, how far I am away from that point, and also the angle. Okay, so that's in this right-hand side here. It's probably a little bit small on your screen, but you'll be able to see it once you've got the new tool. And just immediately to the right of that, there's some quick access buttons. So I have the ability to, and I'll just pick one of these here, change the distance units. So I can click on those, change my distance units, say to meters rather than kilometers, and then that will change those displays. So there's a series of those on the right-hand side. Again, just really trying to simplify things and make it quicker to use. Okay, so just final thing I'm going to say about this. So I've got some stations here with I'm just going to display the coverage on the screen here, so you can see that that's displayed. But I also have the ability to quick access via the palette at the bottom here. So just hovering over that and then clicking on it allows me to change colors or load previous palettes. So again, it just gives me a nice convenient way to move into some of these menus. Okay, so I'm just going to hand over to Nick, who's going to take you through some of the commonly used functions within the tool.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to take you through commonly used functions that were in previous software, and I'm not going to do it by PowerPoint. The PowerPoints will come up, but we'll do it in telecom mainly, so you know where to go to. Right, so here is telecom. The first thing is you'll notice that the direct menu has disappeared. There are several useful functions in the direct menu which have moved. The first one being the profile function, which allowed you to quickly draw a profile between A and B. This has moved to map, and at the bottom here you'll see that there is a path profile. So you can do the path profile as you did before between two locations. Left mouse click, put in the parameters. I'm going to leave them as they are. Left mouse click, put in the receive antenna height. Okay, and up will come the profile between the two locations. The other function that is set of functions that have moved are the intervisibility and those types of functions. They've moved to under coverage, search sites, intervisibility. So in other words, if I want to know where I can see from at any given location, click antenna heights, 40 meters to 2 meters. Erase out, so yes, select location, no, and there is the visibility, and obviously you can do it as a field strength as well. There are the site coverage, site calculations, TXRX, variable height calculations that were also in the original software. So where have these moved to? These are moved in under the right mouse click button. So if one right mouse clicks, and here you'll see right mouse click coverage, there's the site coverage to variable heights, TXRXF field strength and receive field strength coverages, which can be undertaken as per the original direct functions. So those are some functions that have moved. One of the other ones that has moved, which I'm sure a lot of you use and will probably ring us up if you try and use it now, is the, if you remember, there used to be a function under import, which import generic ASCII file, ASCII CSV file. This is now in under database, and there is two functions here. There's import generic station subscribers and import generic microwave links. They both bring up the classic selector that allows you to select what fields are in which columns. So that's the stations and subscriber ones, and if I do the microwave one, there is now one for the microwave imports. So you can, it's all microwave stuff. So next slide. That's the that was the generic stations. Right, so some of the new features. So if we now look at the radio propagation models, so here we go. Tools, propagation model, settings. Okay, so this is the new propagation model settings. It is hopefully less complex than the original, and certainly, but all the original propagation models are in there. The ones that certainly most of you are familiar with is the ITUR 525526. There are two versions of this. There is version 11, which is the Daegu method, and version 13, which is the Bullington method. There is 1546 hasn't changed. 1812.452.14 is the Daegu method of using 452, and 452.16 is the Bullington method, and has extra clutter information. 1812 and the 452 models also require a climatic zone information, which was sort of calculated, but in a fairly roundabout method in the original, and this is now being improved. And so if you're using 452.16 or 1812, you can now load the ITU climatic zones. To do this, along the right hand side here, you'll see ITU zones. You load an RFL file, which we can supply for you, or you can calculate yourself using the map raster information from a DTM and a definition of the sea coastline. And this will produce a value of 1 for coastal, value of 2 inland, and a value of 3 for sea. So if I click this and go OK and close, here you will see a definition of UK with the inland sections being the medium colour blue, the coastal sections being dark blue, and light blue being the sea, and the white area is not calculated or no information. So this can now be applied to the 1812 and 452 calculations. So there is the 452 definition. Okay, so one of the other things that's changed is vectors. You are now able to activate and deactivate vectors. So if we look at a, just turn the subscribers off, a DTM with some vector information on it. Here we've got the vector information, and we can activate or deactivate any vectors, either by names, vector layer, mask vectors, isolate vectors, and up will come a, do you want to isolate lines, paths, rectangles, polygons, and within the polygons or the vectors there are the information layers and comments, and you can filter by that. Or you can just draw a rectangle around it and say, well, actually I'm only interested in the vectors in the middle here. Vectors, stations, vectors, isolate vectors. And lo and behold, only those vectors that are being displayed will be the ones that you use for the coverage or whatever analysis that you're doing. So let me just activate them all again. Map, vector layer, activate vectors, and I just go like that, and that will activate them all again. So one of the things we can do here is actually filter. We can filter vectors under the EWF under an area. Documents, my map, Braintree, single station. So here we are. I've got a single station on the map, and I go coverage, analysis, composite coverage. And let's just so we're interested in areas where, for instance, the let's change that to 40, close, coverage, analysis, composite coverage. So there is the coverage from the station into this area, and I'm only interested in those vectors that are not covered. So the threshold level is, in this case, let's change it to 45 because I'm for 50, so that we've got areas that are covered, composite coverage, so we've got areas that aren't covered. Yes, there we go. So I wanted to calculate which vectors are not covered, or we could do it conversely, which vectors are covered by this station. So there's a new function, map, vector layer, isolate vectors from results layer. So because we want to do not covered, the minimum field strength, and our threshold level is 45, the minimum field strength will be 0, and the maximum field strength will be 44 dB microvolts per meter. And you can go OK, and off it will go, and it will analyze along all the vector lines, and it will only put up those vector lines that are not covered. This means that if you are doing, say, coverage analysis to trying to search for sites or anything like that, you can actually work out which vector line. So you can see, here we are, there's a vector line in the middle, here, and down here, and along the bottom there, that are vectors not covered. So you can now got the ability to either analyze along vector lines that are covered or analyze along vector lines that are not covered. And there are various other functions in there that use these, such as coverage, network planning, station parameter optimization can be limited to vector line. So I'm only interested in trying different antenna heights, different antennas, different tilts into a certain vector or this set of vectors. So that's vectors. There are a whole lot of other functions, but the ability to switch them on and off is useful. Right, one of the other new features is the ability to drag and drop onto the display. So if I go back to ICS Telecom and I bring up my Explorer, I've got a whole lot of functions here. So I've got an EWF file here called, where's it gone? 5G. I should have a 5G area. Here we are. In which case I can just grab it and drag it and drop it on the map. At which point it will add these stations to the map. And as you can see, lo and behold, there are the stations that are on the map. So there's the ability to drag and drop network files, parameter files, clutter files, and vector files in exactly this manner. It's more useful if you've got a pair of screens, because obviously you have the Explorer on the right hand side, and you can then just drag and drop things across. And it is an add function. It isn't, so if you've already got stations, as you'll notice, my original station at the top here is still there. So if you've got original stations or original vectors, it will add to them, it won't overwrite them. So that's one of the new functions. And so the next one is map selector. So at which point I will pass back to Paul.
Okay, thanks, Nick. So I'm just going to take you through. I mentioned it earlier, actually, in the presentation, and I was just reviewing the user interface. So I'm just going to take you through the map selector. Okay, so there's a number of different ways to access this. Function keys, which we've got F4, will bring up that, or there's some other options, and I showed you that kind of top anchor bit as another way of accessing this. So what does this allow you to do? Well, quite simply, it allows you to actually change the map layers that you're viewing. So whether that is a mixture of a terrain layer plus the map. So I have this ability to show this hybrid one here. So you can see that's a synthesis between a map layer and the terrain layer. And I also have this ability, just to mention here, of this preview mode, to turning off and on. So if I've got preview mode on for this button checked, then I can kind of dynamically look at the differences in the background. So I'm just going to move this to the side slightly so you can see it. So it allows me to change to looking at, say, aerial photography within a map layer. So very useful when you're looking at either confirming locations for sites, so that you can see there's a multitude of different, from aerial photography to road type to physical maps that you've got here. And then there's the differences at the bottom here in the types of rendering, so you can look at terrain, black and white, them, colors. And then you can also look at turning on vectors and that from this display as well. Now, another nice feature is you've got the ability to play with the transparency here as well. So looking at things like the overlay results on the screen. So what are we playing with in terms of the opacity? So let me just switch back to, say, one of these ones here. And I'm just going to record the last result. Let's have a look at, so I'll just bring up some coverage on the screen first, so we can have a play with that. Okay, and then I can just change this opacity slightly. So again, I'll just move that slightly to the side just so you can see the change here. So with the map appearance, you can see I can change this, and so it's really being allowing you that options to perhaps make things more legible in terms of the place names and the features on the map below the coverage. And obviously between the combination of those, you can either increase the map layer or decrease the overlay, and obviously get something that you're happy with, which could then either be exported out and viewed somewhere else, or if it's simply taking a screenshot or something like that. And I do have an overall, just moving this back on a second, overall brightness as well that I can play with. So you can see here I can change the overall brightness. So simple sliders, but just allowing you that ability to change between those. And then, as I say, with the different map options there, you've got a combination of things that you can do, whether that's aerial photography, roads, or if you simply want to overlay something onto the coverage layer. So that's the new map properties function. Okay, the next thing that I'm going to cover is on just some of the features in the tool that perhaps we think are going to be of interest. So I'm covering one I've titled as not spot planning. So it's really just looking at identifying areas where there perhaps isn't coverage, and how could I cover those. those areas. So just moving back into the application. So we've got ICS Telecom EV here. So I've got some stations here which I'm showing on the map, and I've got some coverage which I've displayed from these stations. So it could be any type of network technology that we're looking at here. So we're looking at identifying those areas that are not covered. So these areas you can see here currently that don't have any of the coverage on them. So in order to do that, we have under this map filter this option of highlight non-covered areas. Okay, and I simply put in the minimum value and the maximum value. Okay, so that's dependent obviously on the threshold that you're having there. So all I've done is now I've set that so my minimum was my lowest wanted field strength, and then you can see here that it's now displayed this. So these are the areas that were not covered by this network of 3 stations that I had here. Okay, so there's a number of things that I can then do with that. The first thing I'm going to look to do is actually to export this layer, vectorize this resulting layer that we've got here for these not spot areas. Okay, there's a number of different forms. I'm just going to choose a shape file here as an output. Going to give it a name. Okay, so that will then create a shapefile. Now that obviously could then be exported or imported then into a different application, or we could actually use that within the tool as well. So I'm just going to bring in this shapefile and these polygons that I've created here. And I'm going to put this just into layer 1. So this is in the vector layer. Okay, just to make it a little bit more obvious, I'm just going to change some of the vector properties. So I'm just shortcutting there to selecting everything, and I'm just going to modify the vector that we've got here. So I'll just change the color. Color here, and I'll just increase the thickness slightly as well, just so it's a little bit easier to see. Okay, so what we've got there is then we've got a definition created from that original function of these areas where we don't have coverage. Okay, so these are effectively our not spot areas. Okay, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to load just a potential candidate list of stations that we can use for some automated planning and selection of those. So let me just load. Okay, so I've got some additional stations here. So these are potential candidate stations that we're interested in doing the analysis on. Okay, so we have the ability here to run through under the coverage menu, network planning, and then we have this area planning function. Now, I'm just going to deactivate my stations, and that will become obvious why I'm going to do that in a second. Okay, so what we've got here is that we can use these vector polygons that we created, so these areas where we don't have coverage, and we can actually say, right, well, I want to cover these areas, and I've got some candidate stations. So these ones I've deactivated, you can see on the screen here. I can set in then a coverage objective, so I've chosen something 60% in this case. So that's of these polygon areas that we've created, run through each of the candidate stations, select the ones that give me the coverage required to give me that that overall coverage of these areas of 60%. Okay, so small network, so it's run quite quickly. What you can see here is of these 4 potentials, it's selected these 3 here. Those combined will give us this greater than this 60% of the coverage that we're looking at. Okay, so we've got the ability to say, okay, initially there's some areas that we don't cover, create those, and we've done a vector definition of those here. Once we've got those, we've got some automated functions within the tool that can look at candidate stations and say, okay, which ones of those are the best for us to select to achieve the desired level of coverage. Okay, so that was not spot planning, uses highlight non-covered areas. We're just going to talk a little bit about some evolving technologies here and how you can use ICS Telecom EV to do some of those planning. So I'm going to focus on just looking at IoT, and I've chosen the mesh planning as an example, and then Nick's got some 5G that he's going to focus on. Okay, so back into the application, I'm just going to load a different EWF file here. I'm just going to reset the display here. And just to make it a little bit clear, I'm just going to turn these vectors off for the moment. Okay, so the scenario I've got here is I've got a series of gateways or hubs that I'm interested in kind of connecting to, and I'm going to turn on now the subscriber data set. Okay, so this is a series of locations which we're looking to connect into these hubs or gateways. So just using the object properties, I'm going to show you subscribers. So I've got a series of subscribers, so you can see the blue. Let me just take the color out just to make it a little bit easier. So each one of these is basically a point that we're looking to connect to these hubs that we've got here. So these are the larger blue squares that we're looking to connect to. And as I say, the scenario I've used here is looking at a mesh configuration. So we can potentially connect directly to one of these, or we can connect via another subscriber back into one of these gateways. So under the subscriber menu, I've got a function here called parenting and parenting mesh. So this is where I can set up some of the rules for parenting. So how many maximum elements can I have connecting into this hub? What's the maximum number of hops that I'm allowed from a subscriber to a hub? So 2, 3, or whatever it may be. And then the tool will go through on this subscriber set and look at which ones it can connect directly, and then which ones it can connect via a hop or 2 hops, or in this case up to the limit I set here of 3. So I'm just going to run this just in the background. Okay, so each one of these it's going through in turn, looking at, can I connect it in directly? If I can't connect it in directly, is there an intermediary subscriber which I can connect through to get back to the base station? Now, I've chosen obviously a relatively small number of stations here, and you can see that we're achieving a relatively small percentage, and I've deliberately actually selected a small area. Okay, so what we can then do is we can then, in a little similar way as we did in the previous example of using some of the automated functions, is actually say, okay, well, where would we like to perhaps identify areas where we'd like to put some additional stations to increase the coverage of these. So we're trying to pick up a target percentage here. So again, under the subscriber menu, I've got planning, and I've got this prospective mesh function. And I'm just going to briefly explain it. I'm not going to actually then run it, just because it will take a few minutes, and I don't want to wait for that. But essentially, what we've got here is the ability to select where would I be putting these hubs or gateways. How many can I deploy? So a maximum number I'm looking to deploy, and then other functions about the station parameters. So you would configure up those with the parameters for the gateway. Select how many, so this is what it's trying to do here, is for each of the subscribers it will go through in turn and look at the areas of overlap, and where it finds those, and in this case I'm saying, okay, when I've got 7 of those that would overlap, I will place a station down, and that then becomes a location which I would use to supplement the coverage. Okay, and then the target that we're looking for is, we say, how much would we be looking to get to? So if it's, say, 90%, then we'd look to say stop when we've only got 10% of those subscribers left remaining. Okay, so I'm not going to run the function because it will probably take 5 minutes or so to run. But the output of that, and let me just show you the output that I did earlier. So I'm just going to load the results here. So what I'm showing here is that these green stations here are the ones that have been added as a result of that function. So it's gone through, identified these locations as being the best locations to be able to connect in those subscribers up to my target percentage of 90% in this case. So it's just there's a couple of nice functions in there that really around the mesh planning, initially from looking at connecting subscribers and how many do I have connected, and also being able to do this prospective planning as well, and saying where would be the best locations to put my additional hubs and gateways to supplement my coverage. Okay, so I'm just going to hand back over to Nick, who's just going to take you through just some bits on the 5G, again in the theme of evolving technologies.
Okay, I'm not going to go into as much detail as Paul did. This is a piece of concept work that we've undertaken. It was undertaken on a high-resolution digital surface model, which you can see a 3D picture of there on the presentation. And what I've taken is a series of lamp posts. So here is the area in ICS Telecom EV. As I said, it's a digital surface model, so I'm not actually going to do any of these calculations, because being a digital surface model, it's a 1 meter resolution and it will take quite a long time. But what I have is a subscriber database which I've made up, which actually shows all the lamp posts in this area. And the question is given we've got lamp posts, and given that we might be able to put a 5G millimeter wave transmitter on every lamp post, is it required on every lamp post or every other lamp post? They don't know, so this is one of the sort of things we were beginning to look at. What is the coverage from this? So using this information, and in fact I used the coverage network planning, and I used the point planning and used a population information, I was able to come up with a set of lamp posts where, if I applied a transmitter to, we would get the coverage required. So there are the lamp posts. I'll just turn off the subscribers so that we don't get confused, and zoom in on this area. So here are our lamp posts that we've decided that we're going to deploy a 5G system on, and the propagation model that I've used for this is the Daegu 94. Now, in fact, I actually debate whether any diffraction geometry is necessary at all, or whether one should use a visibility and free ellipsoid type calculation, but yeah, whatever, because the frequencies are such, the Fresnel zone is so small that even with a 1 meter digital surface model, it's not really applicable. And I've applied some gas attenuation on the right hand side, and I've also applied some multipath, and looking at the multipath or the 3D reflections, I've decided on a roughness of 4 millimeters, and at 26 gigs that is a rough surface, so it's a Lambertian reflection, not a specular, i.e. Lambertian, it sort of goes everywhere, and specular is like a mirror, it reflects off or reflects back. So, and then I've undertaken this calculation, and to be honest with you, the area, the reflection area, the distance limit was about 200 meters only, so it was about 200 meters around the stations. I'm not going to do it, it takes a very, very long time at this resolution. And you come up with a coverage area something like this, where you've got the green areas where there's indoor coverage, and if I switch using our brand new map layer, I can switch to being a hybrid, at which point you can see all the buildings and so on underneath, and really all you see is that the buildings, it certainly for in-building at these frequencies, it bumps up against the building and then pretty well stops, which isn't surprising. And certainly if I wanted to take this further, I'd want a building there where we can actually look at insertion. So this is a piece of work that we've recently undertaken, and showing the results so that you can see the results here: threshold, good coverage, bad coverage, and the what was undertaken. And as you can see, a 5G for a 5G system operating at 27.6 gigs, it could give you pretty good coverage. So I'm not going to go into huge detail. We've been going for 50 minutes, and if I go into huge detail, we'll be here for at least another hour. So, Sarah.
Okay, lovely. Thanks for that, Nick. Before we take any questions and answers, and I've got a couple lined up there, just a couple of events that we're running later this year. This is to support the release of ICS Telecom EV, and also its sister product HTZ Warfare, which will come out later this summer. Basically, we'll be attending these. If you're intending on visiting, do drop by and see us on the stands. Okay, Nick, next one. Webinar program for the rest of the year. We do have a webinar program. At the moment, we're on the last one before the summer break, starting back in September. That will be with managing the HTZ release, plus followed by webinars relating specifically to ICS Telecom EV. So they'll be running from September. We also run a monthly user group. These are users that have a maintenance contract are eligible to attend. It's a much less formal event. We like to have some delegate interaction, and we take a lot of questions and answers. All of the subjects we cover on our user group meetings are generated from customer requests. First Friday of every month. Our next one is due on the 1st of September. You'll receive an invitation at the end of today's event. Okay, I'm going to take some questions now. We've had a question that has come in from Francis. Have the implementations of propagation models changed? Will we get exactly the same results as before? So that's an assurance, particularly relating to 1812. Nick or Paul, do you want to take that question?
I better take that question. It is changed in as far as the coastal, if you apply the coastal ITU zone, there will be some slight changes. If you don't apply the ITU zone, there won't be.
I hope that answers your
That's for
question,
1812.
Francis.
So all the other 1812 and 452 are the only ones affected by the climatic zone.
Okay, lovely. Thanks for that, Nick. Much appreciated. Okay, we had one come in from Vassal. When will ICS Telecom EV be available? The software is available from today. You will receive notification of how to access the upgrade via email at some point today. As I said, depending on which office you're from will depend when you'll get access for it, but effectively the release date's today. Okay, we've got another one coming here. Hi, I'll be running a new version using the dongle driver 7.5.7. This is due to an IT policy for packaging. Okay, I'm assuming the question is, David, will that still work? So dongle drivers, Paul, do we need to update dongle drivers?
No, so the current we'd have to check with 7.5. Was it 7.5.7 you mentioned, Sarah?
7.5.7.
Okay, which I think is slightly older than the previous, the ones that have been used with the previous incarnations of the tool. So, but the dongle drivers that you've got currently should be absolutely fine. I mean, certainly. I've done some upgrade on some of our training laptops last week for a session that we were running, and no change, and they hadn't been used for a few months, so there was no change on the drivers, and the new the new application worked fine with those dongles. So.
Okay, that's lovely. Thanks for that, Paul. Low priority questions. All questions are important. Is there an undo button as a new feature?
I wish.
Obviously, the answer perhaps to that is no at the moment. Okay.
No, there are some bits, Sarah, just to say there are some kind of auto-save bits which do create some backup files in the if you've got those turned on, but there's not the specific sort of undo as you might have in some other Windows applications, but there is that sort of auto-save bit which can be helpful if I had one that that there was a file had been corrupted for whatever reason, and I was able to access the backup file that had been created. So gives some ability there.
Okay, that's lovely. All right, fine. Just one last question we had come in. The origin of the name EV. EV relates to evolution, the evolution of our software over the past 3 decades. Okay, do we have any other questions? If you do, please do drop them in. I'm just going to cover a few house things that we've got at the moment. As I said, everyone that's entitled to an upgrade from either ICS Designer or ICS Telecom will receive the information about how to migrate by email. If you've got any queries about the migration process, please do contact your local office. Support help desk is available for everyone that needs help. If you've got any follow-up questions after today's event, please do contact them. Drop me a line. I'll pass them on to the appropriate person. As I said earlier, we are recording today's event, so there will be a link available. It'll be dispatched to you later. I'll also be dispatching a survey questionnaire link that's to provide feedback for today's event. Your opinion is important to us. It helps us develop and improve on our webinars. So please, if you get 2 minutes of your time just to complete that, I'd be grateful. Okay, that's about it. We have got another question that has come in. When you drag and drop EWF files onto the map, is there a way to deselect individual EWF files as and when required? So that's dragging and dropping EWF files onto the map is a way of deselecting individual EWF files as and when required.
No, not EWF files. My advice would be, so here I've got some EWF files, so 2 or 3, you can select all of them and drag them in. not as EWF files. What you'd have to do is bring them in separately and maybe use the info1 or info2 or comments, or one of the fields actually might be groups. So you could have group 1 in EWF file 1, group 2 in EWF 2, and group 3 in EWF 3. So you drag them in, and you could then use the all I'm saying is that in the parameters for each EWF, say group, you would have a 1, 2 or a 3. So let's say that one was 1, which belonged to one group, and this guy was 2, group 2. You've then got the ability to isolate or whatever. So isolate, use the isolate function, and up will come the following display. And we're only interested in group 1. Where's group gone? Location, bandwidth, group, here we are, and I'm only interested in group 1. Close, and none of them are activated, which they should be. Yes, there it is up the top there. So you can use that function to activate and deactivate which ones are in operation. Sarah, any more?
Okay, lovely. We do have another one. Just a very quick one. The map scale bar from the bottom of the map view, is that available somewhere else?
The map scale bar, the colours at the bottom here. Or the map distance.
I'm guessing distance. Probably map distance, is it?
It is, yeah.
The map distance is if you do a print, and I'll just do a quick one. So I've selected an area and I'm going to print the map. If you go to preview, fit. Yeah, I've got too big a, hang on. I need to cancel. I need to change the output size 0.01. 0.02, 0.03. And now if we preview, so in this case you can see that you've got the map with all its stations and coverage and whatever on it, and the distance bar is with it. So if you save that lot off as a bitmap and you want to combine them all, what I tend to do is save the whole lot off as bitmap, and then I can just cut or screen grab the bit and put the two together. So if you want a scale that's on the map, that's the best way, in my opinion, of doing it.
That's lovely. Thanks a lot for that, Nick. Zolta, I hope that helped. Okay, if we don't have any more questions, we'll call today's event to an end. As I said, reiterate, if you do have any follow-up questions from today, drop me a line. I'll pass them on to the right person. Just like to take this opportunity to thank Nick and Paul for presenting today. And thanks for your time, everyone. We look forward to hearing from you soon.
Thanks, everybody. Goodbye.
Cheers.